The summer of football has delivered again. The original rivalry at a packed-out Hindmarsh Stadium on a Saturday night alone is about as good as the A-League can get. Never mind a packed-out away bay bringing the heat to a 5-goal thriller, with the home side coming out on top. Brisbane Roar won a game, a story in itself, against the pre-season tip for the toilet seat, no less. Ufuk will have even more work to do on the training park after that defeat, as one of his brightest young defenders is set to leave the club. Auckland is still doing Auckland things at home as they put the league leaders to the sword to again open up an impressively wide title race. Maybe the Mariners don't have a striker problem after all. Western United are winning games way too easily for a team that barely won last campaign. And MacArthur Mondays are back again on this episode of the Round Ball Australia podcast. My name is Lachlan. Avil. Joining me tonight again, the solitary of Jacob Stevens. It's just you and me. Everyone's run away during this period.
We're the only consistent ones, Lachlan, clearly.
Exactly.
I mean, you even went away for a few episodes, but you're back and you haven't missed one since. You know, it's a poor effort from everyone else.
So you're saying you're the real consistent one here?
Well, yeah, that's right, because I covered for you when you were away.
Longest active streak. There you go.
There we go.
It must be.
It counts for something.
Counts for something, of course. Well, we are here, of course, to talk some more A-League football. It is Monday night. It is half-time of MacArthur-Wellington. In fact, they've just kicked off. MacArthur up 1-0. But at the moment, if this result does stand, Jacob, that leaves 5 teams at the top of the A-League ladder, all within 3 points of each other.
Yeah.
We talked about this last week, but even with the results that we've just seen come through, it is seriously even, which is great because it means so many more games are going to be competitive. They're going to have stuff on the line, and you know that premiership race is really alive and well.
Yeah, it's just stupid at this point. Like, how is it still that there's so many teams so close to each other? It's like, you know, it feels like one team starts to run away with it, like, you know, Auckland early on, right? And then everyone starts to catch them up after they drop some points. Then City go out on top, and then, you know, Auckland managed to beat them, so they dropped back down, and they dropped from first to fourth this round, you know. Now Adelaide are on top, so, you know, are they going to be the ones to drop points next week and change the table up again? Who knows? But it just gives, your spot, it gives a bit of something to these games, right? There's more to play for, they mean more, the stakes are higher, and it just makes every mistake that each player makes, that a team makes, that a coach makes in setting his team up, just makes it all the more important to get things right. And then, you know, obviously for the fans, it makes things so much worse when those are the reasons why the team drops points, because it's like, you're that close to getting it and then being able to pull away from the competition. But, you know, it's keeping things very entertaining, and it's almost like you're seeing it said about a few teams, right? You're seeing it being said about City, seeing it being said about Adelaide as a case of how are they this high up? It feels like they're very sort of always shaky and fragile. But then there are other teams like Auckland that feel like they should just be steamrolling their way through it, but they're struggling. So, you know, it's sort of everybody's been brought down a peg at some point so far this season, which is just, it's good to see, because it means that, nobody's running away with it, keeping things competitive. Everybody's really still in with a chance in that top 5, because, you know, they're all in fine form at the moment. And, you know, it's very, very close.
And we're going to get a lot of those like kind of 6-pointer esque games this weekend, right? We've got the Big Blue, which is 6v7 on Friday night. The Bulls play City, that's 3v4. You know, we've got Adelaide Auckland midweek, that's 1v2. It's like there's so much more on the line when these teams come up against each other, which is really exciting to see. Let's start in Adelaide, because this original rivalry game is always massive for the Reds. Yeah. It was a packed out Hindmarsh Stadium. Victory sold out the away bay as well, which was very impressive. The atmosphere at Coopers is always rated amongst some of the highest in the league. Probably the highest most of the time, and this game is the epitome of that. You're in the stands. What was it like, just the atmosphere of being in a football game like that?
It's one of those games that if you've never been to, it's like the Sydney Derby in a way. Like if you've never been to one, you've got to go to one, because it's just there's something about it, that the atmosphere at those games, the original rivalry games, both in Adelaide and in Melbourne, it's electric. It's just, you just feel it as a fan, and you get people around you. This guy, 50, 60 years old or something, sitting, you know, a couple of seats away from me, just shouting the whole game. Like they did not give up. Walking back to the car, you just hear him. You can just hear him down the road shouting the whole time. Like it's just, you get that sort of thing at these games that, you know, it doesn't really doesn't really come out often enough, and it makes it sort of a special occasion when these ones pop up. But what I really like to see was everybody, on social media going, this is the A-League at its core, right? Like this is what the A-League can be, a sold out away bay. Victory always travel well, especially to Adelaide, but I think it's been a while since they fully sold out their away allocation. So it was a very impressive turnout from them, and they didn't stop singing until the last 5 minutes of the game, when I think they sort of were like, oh, this result's probably pretty nailed on at this point. But yeah, great turnout from them. Completely sold out Cooper Stadium. So yeah, it's one of those ones where it sort of reinvigorates everybody and gets them excited about the league again, because you can see these scenes, and being a part of it is awesome. But even just watching it from TV or going back and watching the highlights or whatever, you can feel the atmosphere and you can feel the energy, and it's something that it goes to show, if you get a team like Adelaide who does good stuff, obviously on the pitch, but off the pitch, they connect with the community, they engage with the football fraternity in South Australia. It's sort of a blueprint for how to do things right. And it sort of showed there on Saturday night, because it was fantastic and everybody was talking about how great it was. So I mean, I sort of jokingly said in the group chat in the build up to the game that it's the only rivalry in Australia that matters. It's the biggest in Australia, and copped a bit of flack for it. But I mean, after that, surely you can't disagree with that. After that game on Saturday night, it was absolutely electric. A really, really, really awesome night of football.
It is an astounding fixture, and obviously it arguably has a lot more history than any of the other rivalries, just because of the Victorian versus South Australian dynamic, right?
Yeah,
you have. Obviously, in football, derbies are massive. You have two teams in the same city. That's big, but the A-League's only been around 20 years. You think of other rivalries that go across border lines. You have the Big Blue, but again, that was built on the competitive nature of those two teams in the early days of the A-League, where this rivalry between South Australians and Victorians, that kind of little brother, big brother dynamic that, Vince Rugari was saying, if you're not a part of it, you haven't been to them, you probably don't completely understand.
Yeah, you don't get it.
It's quite fierce, and the fact that a lot of these kind of relationships predates football is, what builds this rivalry up. So you do have a good argument. We won't get into the nitty gritty, but I just think, you talked about the connection that Adelaide have with their community around them. You can see that even in the players that were impactful in this game, right? Ethan Alligadge, outstanding, scored the winning goal. His father, Archie, I believe, is that his name? Archie Alligadge?
No, it was. Gosh, why have you made this difficult now?
I've just thrown a weird name at you.
You have just completely blown me. Richie.
Archie. Okay, I was close. Richie Alligadge. But every time I'm watching football or Adelaide with my dad, he just goes, "Hey, Richie Alligadge, his father was a very good footballer for Adelaide United." You know what I mean? But it's that, the next generation coming through now, and he's been exceptional all season, had a great game here. Stefan Mork, who before this game started was the only Adelaide player in that lineup who have scored against Victory. He did it in his previous stint. But, just those names and those Adelaide people. We even saw Nesta commenting online. He was watching the game. We're going to win the league. Like, just this connection that Adelaide have really helps build it as well. And they got a fantastic result out of this game as well.
Yeah, it's something that the club's really fostered since probably about 2018, 2019, when Riley McGree came back to the club. And there was a clear emphasis then on, we're going to make this a club for South Australians. That's obviously how the club started out. And I'm not going to get into the full history of it all, but the whole reason behind it being united was that obviously in the NSL days, there were two teams from South Australia, and it sort of split things in Adelaide in terms of who you supported. So Adelaide United came in and it united the football community in the city. And then, it sort of became the South Australian club, perhaps lost its way a little bit, where it just became chasing success more and more and more, eventually getting to that with the Premiership and Championship double in 2016. And then after that, it just sort of almost imploded in on itself and fell apart. And the new ownership, you've got to give them props, because they've worked really hard to bring back this identity. appointing Colvier as coach, people like Ryan Kittel as captain, bringing Stefan Mork in, and then keeping around the people who do want to be here, like your Isaias or your Javi Lopez, those foreign imports who come here and then just fall in love with the place, and they almost sort of become honorary South Australians. Or another honorary South Australian who was at the game was Valtteri Bottas. It's doing those little bits that it's making the team feel more than just a team, right? It is representing the whole city, it's representing the whole state, and I think they really embrace that. I don't think that they feel the pressure of that. It's part of being an Adelaide United player, as that's the case. And so you see it with Nesta in that he's still an Adelaide boy, so he's going to go and he's going to comment, "We're going to win the league," on the final scoreline on the A-League's Instagram page. So it's like, they're doing really good things at the club, and it's one of those ones that we're always talking about. Adelaide, the Mariners, those sorts of clubs that are doing these things that are setting a blueprint for some of these smaller sides to be able to really tap into what makes Australia very special, is that a lot of the population centres are super isolated, and so you become almost sort of very parochial in that you're attached to the place that you live, and they're doing a fantastic job. And you mentioned some of those players, Alagic, great game. Mork didn't stop running the whole time he was on the pitch. I thought Ben Falami had a tremendous game as well, if lacking a little bit in end product, but I thought otherwise he was fantastic. Zach Clough looked great again. It was a really good attacking display from Adelaide. I mean, still some issues. They still had some problems defensively, conceded a few goals, looked a little bit caught out at times.
Before you dive too much into football, I just wonder, I know this is kind of a tangent we didn't plan on going down too much, but I think it's a cool discussion, is that when you look at football internationally and then you consider the history of sport in Australia, European, and let's just use England as an example because I think it's one most people are familiar with, the origins of a lot of these football clubs is that they were embedded in their community, and it was the football club that you earn your money and then you pay your ticket on the weekend. That was kind of how your life worked. And in Australia, we don't see as much of a connection where the football clubs totally embed themselves in the place where they're living. Obviously, part of that is that a lot of those kind of working class stories are often attached to AFL clubs just because the sport has been popular for so much longer in Australia. But maybe what I'm hearing you speak and the way you're speaking about Adelaide United, maybe that is the best example we have in Australia in terms of a club really enrooting themselves in the community around them and becoming, I mean, obviously football is still a second tier sport. It's doesn't have the popularity levels of some of the AFL clubs, the Adelaide Crows, even the Adelaide Strikers and the Big Bash. But the fact that it's one city, it's one club, it's probably doing it better than most.
Yeah, I think Perth Glory have done a good job as well. And you can see that through the struggles they're having right now, is that the fan base is still there. They're still getting, 5,000, 6,000 people out to games when, you look at where they are on the table and you look at their performances this season, you go, why would anybody want to show up for that? And it's because these fans feel a connection to the club. So I don't think Adelaide's completely alone. I just think that they've been fortunate enough to be able to pair that with having on-field success consistently throughout the years, which is obviously a big boost. There's no denying it, right? It's not just in Australia, it's all around the world. It's not just football, it's every sport, is that people want to watch your team win, right? You don't want to go to a game thinking, they're going to lose this one, it's going to be rubbish, why am I here, why did I spend my money? You want to have at least the illusion that they might put up a fight. So it's that does help considerably. But even last season when Adelaide finished 8th, only 2 points off of having to go into the playoffs for the Australia Cup, and still averaging 10,000 crowds across the season. It just goes to show that if you put the work in at that level as a club, to engage the people and appeal to them, it makes things so much easier, because you then can have that ironed on fan base. And it's something the Victory did have in the early days as well. And then obviously when Melbourne Heart came in, obviously it caused sort of a little bit of a schism in a way. It wasn't massive, it wasn't like half the fan base left or anything like that, but it did sort of cause a bit of friction. And while we've got the Melbourne Derby coming out of that, which is fantastic in its own right, it's a great spectacle, sells out Amy Park, a great atmosphere at those games, it does mean that sort of now there's these two clubs. Who do you pick? What's the it becomes more difficult for a fan to develop an attachment in the first place, because they've got to make a decision. But then in some ways that makes the attachment that they do have even bigger, because they've had to make that choice consciously, so they've got to back themselves in it. Whereas with Adelaide, you don't make a choice. It's Adelaide or it's nothing, and so it's, two different ways about it. But I think just you've just got to give things time, right? Like, yes, these clubs in the footballing landscape are all very, very new, 20 years old, Perth a couple years older than that. And then some of the most recent ones only, 5 or so years old. It's sort of like, give it time. We spoke to Max Rushton at Unite Round, right? And he said basically the same thing. It's like, how do you fix football in this country? Give it 100 years.
Yeah.
We're
a bit impatient for that.
We are, but it's like every other big league in the world has had that time to grow and develop and things like that. And so then the fan bases do. And we're starting to see that now with the A-League, with this sort of second generation coming through, where people who went to the games are now, when they were younger, are now bringing their kids to the games, or players who played for teams are now having their children play for that same team and score goals in the rivalry match. Like, it's starting to build that, and it gets to a point where you get that second generation, third generation, and those things that were worrying that first generation are just long in the memory now. And you look back at it and laugh. You go, oh, they were concerned about low crowd numbers. Like, we're doing fine. We got 50,000 here. Like, it's just one of those things that over time, time overshadows all. And it's very easy to sit here and say that, obviously, and I'm not suggesting that there aren't real issues that need to be addressed, and that there aren't any problems, and that we should all just be fine and happy and go with the flow. But time definitely helps, and I think we're seeing the effects that time does have on the league, because it is starting to get stronger and stronger and stronger off the pitch, on the pitch. It's great to see, and it's games like this, clubs like Adelaide, Perth, the Victory, that sort of exemplify that, I think.
Yeah, nicely said. Let's get stuck into the game. I think, one segment of the footballing population that isn't afforded very much time at all is often the head coach. And Arthur Dillers, it's now 6 games winless since he took over. They've really struggled, Victory. And, they had some really nice moves in this game. Obviously scored 2 goals, like the Ryan Teague, Fornaroli's ball through, like some really good football being played. Obviously, that ball from Kikianis over the top, which is exceptional, by the way.
Yeah.
A great run from Mork. Josh Rawlins has just come into the side to, be cover for the transfer Jason Guerrier. Gets his line a little bit wrong, and all of a sudden the cutting edge of Adelaide are throwing goals. So it's hard. The new coach, a couple of new adjustments in the team as well. He's had to manage a fair bit. But, the rumour that we're hearing is that Melbourne Victory have committed to him for a little while, and that they're not looking to bring anyone else in, at least at the moment. But, 4 becomes 5, becomes 6, and all of a sudden pressure is really mounting, and they're outside of the 6. So if they want to compete at this season, and we've spoken at length about how the fact that with all these other teams going the youth angle, Melbourne Victory should have an advantage, and they still do with their squad, but they are not taking full advantage of it.
Yeah, it's sort of fallen off a little bit. The wheels have come off since PK departed. I think were Victory second in the league at one point.
Yep,
I believe, and now sitting in 7th place. So it's been a bit of a tough run for them. I thought that Arthur Dillers actually got that first half spot on. I thought that Victory played exceptionally well. I thought the starting lineup was really, really well chosen. Obviously, like you said, sort of forced his hand a couple of spots. Rawlins had to come in because of Gary's departure and so on, but
Santos as well.
Santos coming in as well. But I thought that what he did actually, I thought it was a solid starting 11. I thought they did their job really well. They caused Adelaide a lot of problems in that first half. It was one of the few first halves this season where Adelaide weren't a completely dominant force. Okay, yes, they went into the break 2-1 up, but I think you'd be kidding yourself if you said that Adelaide dominated that first half. I thought it was actually probably swayed more in Victory's favouring. Victory, they controlled the tempo much better. They actually looked a lot more confident on the ball than Adelaide did. Adelaide looked a lot, rushed, a bit harried, a bit, confused at times.
Is it worth talking about this game in halves or in quarters? Because it seemed to have some effect on the football.
Well, yeah, those drinks breaks, right? I mean, Adelaide came out of each one of them and scored a goal almost directly after. So perhaps a conspiracy. They need to check what was in those drink bottles or something. But
well, the other thing there was that apparently both teams had requested that they don't have drinks breaks. But I guess it's a policy. Then it's a policy, right?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, the referees would have said, "We're having a drinks break. We're having a drinks break, boys." So maybe they would have needed it. It was quite hot out there, and I think in hindsight, Adelaide would be quite glad that they did have them because it was a chance to reset. But I think Victory. I don't think they should feel hard done by, because they did still make mistakes. They didn't play, fantastically, but I thought that they did get things right. And that's what's been so frustrating with Arthur Dillers, is he has gotten things right. And then as things are starting to click, he makes a change, and then it starts to fall apart again. So, Victory equalise is 2-2. And then, you take off the goal scorer, Santos. You take off Warneroli, who's having a great game. You take off Arzani, who's been putting the ball in the box fantastically all game, gets the assist for that Santos goal. You take them all off, and then all of a sudden Victory have to almost sort of start again. They're back another 60 minutes, back to the start, as if it's a fresh starting 11 against an Adelaide side who's bedded into the game now. So, I sort of said it on the last episode that Dillers, it's almost like he feels the need to fix things that aren't broken. And he had something that was working there, and Victory were on top, and then he made those changes and they lost that advantage. And it's easy to say in hindsight, but it's been a consistent thing throughout his tenure, is that he's been making these changes and then things haven't been going their way. They haven't gotten the results. And so I think, yes, correlation doesn't equal causation, but when it's a consistent problem like this, it sort of tends to go into the case of it being a causation. You've got to be smarter with your substitutions and taking off your 3 key attacking players all really closely within one another. And yeah, it was an interesting move for sure, and it slowed the Victory down completely. And once that game slowed down towards the back end of the second half, that was it. And I think that a lot of Victory fans were almost sort of resigned to the result, that it just felt like there was nothing they could do. And quite critical, I saw as well, some Victory fans of Arthur Dillers, who was, cracking a laugh, having a smile on the sideline, 3-2 down away to your rivals with 2 minutes left in the game. It's not a great look, but I think that he needs to be just perhaps a little bit more considered with the substitutions and the changes that he makes, especially in game, because it completely derailed the Victory in this one. I'm taking Mashash off as well. To be fair, he was run absolutely ragged. He was down, hurt a couple of times as well, so you can kind of understand that one. But when you're also taking off your other 3, attacking players, it doesn't help. So he just, I think, just needs to approach his games a little bit differently. If you've scored a goal, that's a good thing. You don't have to make a change. Like play it out a little bit, see what happens, and then if you can't keep in the game, then that's when you need to bring those in. Don't make change for change's sake. And it's especially funny when you think of it from the angle of, well, perhaps he's trying to get ahead of the opposition, and it's like, ahead of Adelaide, who historically this season haven't made their changes until the 80th minute anyway. So it's like, it's difficult not to get ahead of a team like that. But it's those substitutions again have come to haunt Victory. And it's not that the players that they've got are terrible, right? It's a very, very good squad that Victory have. It's just that when you make bulk changes in one area of the pitch like that in the middle of a game, it's going to make things more difficult. And I think that's what we're seeing so far from Arthur Dillers' sides so far in his tenure.
Well, another angle to look at it is that in one respect, he hasn't changed anything that needed to be changed, because Jack Duncan started in goal.
Yeah.
The paperwork was good from Mitch Langrak. He made the bench in the end. He travelled with the team. He was wearing the number 1 jersey, the number 2 keeper sitting on the bench. But fair play to Jack Duncan as well, because he backed it up. It's odd. There's been actually some very good goalkeeping performances in games where the sides have conceded 3 or more goals. Jack Duncan's done it once or twice. Patrick Beach did it this week against Auckland as well, which we'll talk about a little later. Matt Sutton comes to mind a couple of times for Western United, but Duncan was very good here and has really vindicated that position. And I do think, as we were talking about last week, it is his spot until he screws up, I think. And then what a luxury to be able to say, okay, you're having a little dip in form, let's bring in Mitchell Langrak. I think that's quite nice. Talk to me about a new defender that's trailing with Adelaide United at the moment, as we get into our kind of transfer chat.
Transfer chat, yes. So it's been reported widely across social media that 26-year-old Dutch defender Dan Klomp is currently on trial with the club. He was supposedly at the game on Saturday night, which is a great game to bring your prospective signing to go, here's what the club's all about. It doesn't get much better than that.
Didn't quite get a Lockie Wales-esque photo with the lanyard and the suit and everything.
Well, I don't think anybody knows who he is, to be honest. I don't think cameras were on Bottas throughout most of the game anyway, but no, he is by all accounts an incredibly interesting player, and I say that because he's a centre back who is known to spend more of his time in the attacking third than the defensive third, And this is
Interesting.
from people who are fans of the Canadian Premier League, where he's play or was playing for Valor. He was the Canadian Premier League Player of the Year in 2023 as a centre back, which is itself an
Yeah,
insane
wow.
achievement. And then back-to-back Defender of the Years in 2023 and 2024. He's got, I think it's something like 15 goals in 100 games there, which is an insane. That's a better strike rate than Ben Falami has, and it's like that's crazy for a centre back. He's also played a little bit of right back in his career as well, so. To me, it's an interesting choice because, yes, Adelaide need defenders, but I don't think that either of the centre-backs have done anything to warrant being almost sort of replaced. And then it seems weird to bring an import foreign visa player in just to sit on the bench and be depth. So it seems like it's a bit weird, and it might signal a change in tactics. Like Kikianis, Adelaide wouldn't have won that game without him. His balls in behind were fantastic all night long. Bart Vriends has been very solid defensively off the ball for Adelaide so far since he's come in. So, I don't think that either centre-back has done anything wrong. He's played a little bit of right-back, like I said, but Adelaide don't play with a right-back anyway. So the only thing I can think of maybe is that Kito's spot is up for grabs. And that they shift some things around and they just play with a 3 at the back. But Kito's the captain. Are you going to drop your captain? I think that, he's had some issues again this season defensively, but at least in terms of his attacking output this season, it's been much better than it was last season. So it just seems weird because Adelaide have found something that really works with this sort of asymmetrical shape that they have going, where you've got Piraeus and Clough both on the right wing, but then you've got sort of a standard left wing with a winger and a fullback, and then the midfield's a box with only the single striker. And it's just sort of it's a bit of a weird fluid shape, but it's working for them, and it's doing they're doing really, really well when they're getting forward. So it seems weird to bring somebody in and then you might have to change that to fit him into the side. I guess obviously we'll see what happens. Maybe because he spends a lot of time further forwards, he's being projected as a midfielder or something like that. Perhaps it would be pretty crazy, I'm sure, but that wouldn't be the first time we've seen Adelaide try players out in different positions. So I'm very excited to see more of him. I'm going to go have a look at some of his highlights and check out what he's all about, because I'm going to be honest, I don't know a whole lot about him other than what people have been saying. But just from the outset, it seems like a bit of a strange one. I'm all around getting defensive reinforcements for Adelaide this season because it's the one spot on the pitch they really, really need them. They brought Elsie in thinking he's going to be our defensive cover, and then Elsie got injured.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, they're an injury away from starting Isaias at centre back again. So definitely need defensive cover. But if you're spending a visa spot on your bench, it just seems like a weird choice for me. But by all accounts, a quality player. And like I said, I'm going to go find out a bit more about him and what he's all about and how he might fit in. So keep an eye out for that.
All right, I'll look out for the scouting report.
That's right.
Brisbane Roar won a game of football, Jacob.
They did.
What a headline that is. It's crazy. We were literally talking about last week, that interview that Kaz did with Channel 10. It had sacking the coach next week written all over it.
Yeah.
And that is the week they decided to win. They had the run of Newcastle and the Mariners at home. They said, nah, screw that. We're going to go away to Sydney, who most people had tipped to win the whole thing at the start of the season. They've have had a few troubles since then. But then just to be just outlandishly clinical in front of goals, 2 games after they lose Thomas Waddingham as well, who's going to Portsmouth, it defies all logic, and it just provides further evidence as to how crazy this league could be. Yeah. It just, Henry Hoare coming back from loan from Korea because, the team at the bottom of the A-League is loaning players out to the K1. It's just
That's how it works.
That's how it works, right? That's how football works. You've got Lucas Harrington, who missed the first month and a half of the season because he was doing his school exams. He comes in and scores his first professional goal after starting the last 6 or 7 games. It's just weird, right?
Yeah, that is exactly it. It's weird. Like, at least with the Perth one, we were like, it was just a matter of time before they got a win. But with Brisbane, at least myself, I thought this could be the side that doesn't win a single game all in an A-League season. Like, they would be setting a record for being terrible. I genuinely thought that might be the case. leave alone it happening against Sydney, who, okay, maybe haven't had the form that everyone thought that they might. They're still on paper a far better team than Brisbane are. So it's just, weird is exactly right.
And they almost lost it as well, right?
They almost lost it. It's just, it's just so weird. And it, like, how would you feel I don't know. Brisbane fans, comment, let us know what it feels like to win that game, but knowing that you also don't want that because you want more reason for the coach that's been terrible so far this season to get sacked. Like, it would be super conflicting to see your team getting a result over somebody like Sydney, seeing, Henry Hoare, Lucas Harrington, your young stars scoring goals, But then, on the flip side, it's like, well, they can't just go and sack Zadkovic now after that result. You can't sack your coach after a win. Like, it's just, it feels like it's a weird situation they found themselves in because of that. So I sort of put it down there in the rundown. They won, but at what cost? Because it did. You're right, Lockie. It felt like everything was gearing up for Zadkovic to be fired, and now it's like, well, they're going to have to push it a week at least.
Yeah. Do you think there was like a massive classifier here? Because we talked about last week how tired Western Sydney might be and that opening the door for the Mariners. Yeah. Sydney FC had 1 day less than that. They only had 2 days in between their fixtures. Now, the game against Wellington wasn't very intensive, right? But 2 days is 2 days between a competitive professional game of football. They did look tired. I think the first goal, that ball over the top, is evidence of that. Like, just the defenders were nowhere near it, right? And then Devon Ishmears, who shouldn't be as affected, was probably indecisive in what he was going to do and left the space in behind for the chip. But it was a tired Sydney. They looked tired. And you saw, when those fresh legs came off the bench, that's when the game changed, right? Tiago Quintal, what a season he's having. His introduction to professional football, outstanding finish from him.
Incredible.
And then Jordan Courtney-Perkins coming on and running a bit of legs. We know he likes to get forward and getting the header as well. So, obviously, if you're Brisbane, a win is a win at this point. 3 points, it does not matter. But looking at the Sydney side of things, is that enough to look past the disappointment of being the first team to lose to Brisbane? Or, they've got a couple of important games coming up. They do have to bye in between the 2 legs of the round of 16 and the ACL2 in February. So, they get the brunt end of the fixture list here. But they know they've got some opportunities going forward.
Yeah, for Sydney it would suck, but I mean Auckland lost to Perth, and they're still doing fine, right?
Yeah.
Like they've not that get them down. So it'll suck to be like, we just lost to Brisbane, boys. But you've just got to keep going and back yourself and believe that you're the better side. But I think you're right. They were definitely tired. How much it played into it, I agree. On the first goal was clear sign of that, and the subs definitely helped. But they're also they're professional footballers, right? Like they should be at the peak of their fitness right now in the middle of a season. And yes, it's 2 days in between, but it happens all around the world that you get fixture congestion like that, and most teams can deal with it with some semblance of competency, whereas Sydney just came out the blocks so slowly, and it's just a shame. It's a shame because Sydney, I was really excited to see what they could do this season with the squad that they've built, and we were all sort of going, this could be one of the most dominant seasons we've seen from a side in A-League history with the squad that they've built, the style of football we'd seen them play in Asia in the pre-season, and we thought this could be a good one, and they've just not been able to find it. And yes, they've been rocked by injuries and all that.
It feels like their starting 11 is fragile, right? As soon as they lose one,
it's like it's weird in a way that they're so reliant on singular players, but it's also like it can be passed around. It could be any of those players. So if you lose any of them, then that's a big blow. Whereas it's not like some teams where it's like they're reliant on individual players, but it's 1 or 2 people. So if they're fit, it's still okay. Sydney, there's a clear plan with their best 11. And then outside of that, it does feel a little bit weaker for them.
Maybe like the front 6.
Yeah.
Maybe. Like they're the key players. It's moving forward, right? They've always had defensive issues.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's that front unit, and that's like when they have all been fit, we've seen what they can do, and it just they tear sides apart. And it's also a case of I don't think their players are finding form at the same time. Joe Lolly's had a few good games, Patrick Klamala's had a few good games when he's been out there, but it's not always been at the same time, so they've not really been able to put teams to the sword. And then when they're conceding as many goals as they are as well, that doesn't help. So. Yeah, I think just a combination of a lot of things for Sydney as to get this result. But you've also got to give props to Brisbane for being able to capitalise on it, right? It would have been very easy for them to have just done what they've done all season and not be able to get a result over the line even against tired opposition. But they did, and they came out with intent and they played aggressive and they played hard early to really press the advantage of having a fit side. And it worked.
Yeah.
It worked, and that was just it was Sakovic has copped a lot of flack, but you credit where credit's due. Like he did well to set the side up for that and get them playing that sort of football early. So it's probably not easy again for Brisbane fans to acknowledge that, but it's the case in that he actually did a good job this game in setting the side up for success, and they got it. So what that means for Brisbane's season, whether they kick on from that, I don't know. Sydney. Yeah, like I said, it's all a confidence thing for them now, because if the players can back themselves, then they should be okay. But there's been just so many things for them this season that have just not gone their way that it can be a little bit demoralising.
And again, like the idea that this title race is so open, it means that the door is always open for this kind of middle pack of teams. If you go on a good run for a month,
like
you
Western.
will climb. Like Western, exactly. Yeah. You will climb the ladder. So as chaotic and up and down and variable as Sydney's season has been, we know there's the quality for them to be able to go on that run and be towards the pointy end. Of course, another thing that is going to work against them in terms of chances of success this season, but obviously is an overall good club in the long term. We believe we get to label this game the Portsmouth Derby, right? Because we know Thomas Waddingham is on his way. At least that's still the rumour. Nothing's been confirmed yet. But Hayden Matthews, Portsmouth are having another go at him. The rumour is $2.5 million Australian dollars is an offer that is set to be accepted by Sydney FC. That's what we think. I don't know if it quite breaks the Australian transfer record. These numbers are all pretty private, but that's about what Joe Gauci went for from Adelaide to Aston Villa, so it's around about that number. So, look, we believe, again, that Hayden Matthews had 3 bids from him from Portsmouth, who are absolutely loving the Aussie flavour at the moment.
That's right.
Which is cool. Bit of familiarity when the new guys go over there. You've got some of those local relationships to lean on, which is really cool. But yeah, another really quality young A-League player heading over to Europe, Becca, which is really cool to see. But obviously, the flip side, Sydney FC, they're in a position to have success this season, and this transfer is going to work against that.
Yeah. It really puts into doubt their already shaky defence, right? Because Matthews has been sort of a revelation, especially last season, his breakout season. He looked fantastic. Perhaps, a little way off his best this season, but, he's got Alex Popovic alongside him, who's also a young centre-back. So, that partnership is still going through a teething phase. And now Hayden Matthews is going to leave. That leaves just Popovic, but is he going to get extended because he's just on a short-term loan? So, there's a lot of questions. So Sydney are going to be very busy, in January to try and fill some of those holes. But it's a good fee for them to get as well, right? Like that's this. Yeah. This is what we were sort of talking about last week, where it feels like the floor has been raised for Australian players in terms of what they're worth. It's not the days now where you can just pinch them for nothing. It's like, if they're a quality player, clubs are going to demand a price because, well, look at these players in the past that have gone, right? Yeah, Matthews has gone for 2.5. Gauci has gone for about that. Aaron Kunda probably a little bit more. Even now, with Ariaf Pio, 800,000. Like, you're starting to get this point of going, you could point to somebody else and say, well, no, but they went for that, so that's what we deserve here as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great thing for the clubs, because it's becoming more and more evident that they're going to need to sort of lean on that and rely on that to remain financially stable through the future. And it's developing players and selling them on for fees and things that's going to help out there. So the more that floor can be raised, the better. But yeah, it doesn't help Sydney in the immediate future, because they've now got massive defensive issues in terms of the performance on the pitch, but then also in terms of the squad, because there's just not a lot of cover there. So I think priority number one for them will be extending Popovic or offering him potentially a full-time contract, and then looking to bring in an extra defender, obviously, to replace Matthews and partner Popovic in the centre of defence. Not that there's a huge number of options out there, especially Australians. There's, Harrison Delbridge has been reported he's signed on in Korea, so he's not going to be available. The few that we have seen linked have been to other A-League clubs, and so if they've started those negotiations early, it's going to be more difficult for Sydney to come in and try and swipe them away. So yeah, it's they've got a lot of work to do, a lot of work ahead of them, but it's still early days. In terms of this window, they've got a bit of time, but for Sydney's sake, they'll hope that they're getting things right, because you're spot on, Lucky, that there's a chance for them to win something this season with the squad that they've built. And it's a transfer like this that could perhaps push them off that path a little bit. So they're going to want to make sure that they can recover from this nicely and start to find form and get some results back and push for a deep finals run and perhaps some silverware.
And I think in terms of that raising floor of Australian players, we're in a period of obviously financial difficulty for a number of the teams. Sydney maybe aren't quite in that category, but many of them are. And probably the 800K for Ariath Piel is the better example for a club like Macarthur. Right now, they need that money. And so as clubs continue to rebound from COVID and the financial distress that, has been well documented, plenty on this show as well, as teams rebound from that and get into a stronger financial position, it's suddenly, okay, we actually don't need $800,000 right now. Like, we don't have to say yes to that. So let's hold out for more, because these players we know in other markets, in other secure markets, would be worth more money. But it's the fact that these Australian clubs, with the revenue they're bringing in, 800,000 looks pretty good to them. But hopefully in 5 to 10 to 15 and more years, that's like, oh, you're giving us 800,000. That's not worth our time, right? So,
yeah, exactly.
Hopefully more to grow on and on. I've just watched, is that Chris Economides? It is. He's made his debut and he just missed a chance to equal up at 2-2. Wellington have gone 2-1 up, by the way.
Wellington have gone 2-1 up. Crazy stuff.
There you go. Chris Economides' debut for Macarthur halfway through the season. Little Easter egg in there for you. Let's go to Western Sydney next. There were so many crazy games in this round and an absolute ridiculous final 15 minutes in this one. Mariners 2-0 up. The Wanderers coming at them with like serious energy and intensity. And then, come on, who else? Juan Mata. Just that little, it's just that the ball that floats in. We see it so often. The ball goes in the corner. It's recycled to the shoulder. You put the ball in, it's headed away, but he just puts it on an absolute platter for James Temelkovski, who scores his first A-League goal, the off-season signing from Marconi Stallions. He's off and running now. He was hampered by injury earlier in the season, so don't be surprised if he plays a much bigger role in the back end of the league. And then you have the other chance, Bradley Steele goal line clearance, and then Docker runs down the other end to wrap it up. Just one of those games where, we'll talk about Western United soon. That felt like that game was done by 60 minutes. This one felt like it was just getting started. And just that last final period of the game was just absolutely electric. Again, it's the good things about football. It was pumped into this game hard.
That Juan Mata ball is something that people who only watch, your really high level football, your Premier League, Champions League, World Cups and stuff, it's taken for granted, right? That a player is going to put that in perfectly, 9 times out of 10. But it's not until you see a player that can do that in the A-League. That's not a slight against A-League players by any means, but Juan Mata is a freak of nature, right? And that's why he was one of the best players in the world for quite a while with Manchester United. So to be able to see somebody who can consistently do that, it's such a big boost. Even if he's not had the impact perhaps this season that people will have wanted, it's moments like that show what he's got in his locker that he can pull out. And it got that goal for the Wanderers and brought them into the game. I'm not surprised to see Temelkovski finally on the score sheet. Tremendous talent. He's been almost all around the country basically throughout his career. Spent a decent chunk of time here in South Australia, and then, like you said, Marconi Stallions, now to the Wanderers. I really like his profile as a striker. He's got really clever movement off the ball, as we saw here, really good header of the ball as well. And he can finish with his feet well too. So it's just your classic number 9 he just puts the ball in the back of the net. And he's had a habit of doing that wherever he's gone, which sort of shows that he's not particularly fazed by who's around him. If he gets the chance, he's going to bury it. So I really want to see more of him this season for the Wanderers, because while they've been scoring a lot of goals, yes, it always helps to have another person who can do it too.
It does.
Especially when, again, it's like kind of like Sydney, when you're conceding a lot as well. You do just need as many players who can score goals as possible in your side. And then for the Mariners to then be able to just, it's 2-1. You perhaps on the edge of losing that lead that you've got. And then to run up the other end, Docker, what a moment. It's just it was an insane game, and I think it amplified, yes, by the fact that it was so late in the game that it happened. But I think regardless of when that sort of thing happens in a game, it's huge, and you could feel that happened. And yes, because it was so late in the game, the Wanderers were like, that's it. We've tried what we can. We've done what we can. But I think even if that happens, in the 60th minute, if the Wanderers get it to 2-1 in the 60th, and then a few minutes later, the Mariners block a shot on the goal line, go up the other end and score, I think that even that deflates a team, because you're like, we were so close. It's like we saw in the Adelaide Melbourne game. That happened twice, where Melbourne were like, yes, we've got it, and then immediately deflated a couple of minutes later by an Adelaide goal. So it's another case for the Wanderers of just not being able to hold on for results, and it feels like they haven't been able to do it a lot this season. They did it against Adelaide in a fantastic performance, but we haven't really seen that Wanderers side in terms of their style, their grittiness, their determination since that game. They've shown they can do it. So why are they not? Like that's the big question. Is it the personnel changes? Mata being benched? Is it?
Well, why do you think he was on the bench? Right, because the turnover, he hasn't been playing much more than 60 minutes at all. Right, that's kind of been his limit. And then you're coming off a 3-day break. He's started the last 3. My first assumption is that you just need to give him a little bit of rest over that short of a turnaround, and with the travel, it just wasn't feasible for him to play or just to start this game, right? That has to be it.
Yeah, just protecting him probably. But it's like, if you've got that caliber of player, like he's so quality, and we saw that with the ball that he put in for the goal. Like, it's a tough decision to have to make, and perhaps if he starts, it's something different that brings some sort of stability to the side. I don't know.
But you got to take care of him, because look at what's happened with Douglas Costa, right, in Sydney. Yeah. If you overwork them, then they go out for 6 weeks.
Yeah, that's the problem with these, older players, is that very rarely are they, a workhorse that's going to be around forever and never ever get injured. And, especially if they have been playing at a really high level their whole career, where it's going to have been physical, it's going to be tough on their body, they're going to be training really, really hard with the best players in the world. That wears on you over time. So yeah, no, I mean, you've got to protect him for sure. But, that's my question, is like, was that the reason why they just didn't quite have what they needed in this game? I don't know. Was it something else? Like, it feels like it's something different every week for the Wanderers. Whether it's defensive issues, whether it's the midfield, whether it's being wasteful in front of goal, man management, substitutions. Like, it's a different thing every week right now. And for Stadjic, I can imagine that's really difficult, because you can't just pinpoint and work on one thing. It's a multitude of things, and it could be any of them at any given time. But none of them are major enough to completely blow everything up and just focus on one, So, it's tough for the Wanderers, because, I mean, we're talking about Sydney earlier and how a lot of people had big expectations for them. It was the same for the Wanderers, so people going, it was going to be Sydney Wanderers 1-2 in some capacity, maybe throw Victory in there as well. And now it's like all three of those sides are now sort of struggling. So it goes to show what we all know about the sport.
Like, all three of those teams, though, it feels like they've shown the potential on their day.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And it's, what version of that team are you
consistency.
It's consistency. When you step out every week.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, and for sometimes it has been injuries and things like that, but it's about finding that consistency. And it's no point being the best team in the country 2 or 3 games a year when the rest of them you're bang average. If you've got to be you'd prefer to be above average the whole season, because at least then you're more likely to sway results in your favor. Like a game like this where it feels like they might be back in it late, and then they concede that goal. So no, it's I can't pinpoint it for the Wanderers, honestly. And I'm not massively in depth with everything that's going on at that club or anything, but it just seems like every week it's something different we're talking about for them. And that cannot be good for a club, because it's, like I said, it's difficult to pinpoint, it's difficult to work on. So yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens with them, whether they make any big moves in January to try and fix things up. I don't know, but Matt is always going to be the focus of attention because he's the big name player. But there's other movements all around and things like that. So yeah, it's just a tough spot for the Wanderers at the moment.
Yeah, James Dodd was saying on Twitter, I believe there's hints that another defender will be signed in this little January window, which would be very welcome for Wanderers fans.
They would be happy with that.
In terms of transfer rumours for the Mariners, there's been a lot of conversation about where their goals coming from and their firepower up front. Alu Kuol and Ryan Edmondson haven't really been firing this season. Well, they both fired in this game.
Both got on the score sheet, yeah.
Great goals. I mean, Alu Kuol, obviously the left foot into the far corner, really pinpoint finish. That's a really good striker's goal, and Edmondson in the right place at the right time with the header. Do they need to explore other striking options on paper? I know they're different profiles, but two strikers that have had success at moments.
I think you've got to be. If you're going to be serious about going on and being successful, you've got to have a consistent goal scorer, whether it's on the wing, up front, whatever it might be. I mean, Western United, right? That was their real big need in the offseason, was they needed someone to finish chances. Yeah. They bring in Ibusuki, and look at what they're doing now, and it's just sort of they've been able to anchor the side around that and perform really well. I think that's sort of what Mariners are lacking, that yes, both of these players, we know the quality when they're on, but they've just not been able to do it often enough this season. And even Edmondson, last season when he was brought in, he wasn't fantastic until that final series when he went off, right? And he sort of was a big reason why the Mariners found their success late on, was Edmondson. And Alu Kuol has always been a big what if. It's a what if he kicks on from this performance? What if he goes on and does this? And he never has done yet. So, and obviously doesn't help having the big, shadow of his brother to sort of live in and always be compared to. But that's
the case. Or the little shallow, shadow. Jesus,
yeah, that's right. You got there eventually. Yeah. But I think that if they're serious about things, that they have to look for something to try and just bring a consistent goal scoring threat into the side, because it does almost feel like these two, they're just, it's not consistent enough from them. They're not threatening enough when they are on the ball, or when they're given chances. They're kind of wasteful at times as well. So, while the Mariners have had some problems elsewhere on the pitch this season, defensively, Caltech's taken a step back this year. Obviously, they were without Sainsbury for a large part of it. There's been questions about where Dockers should be playing on the pitch and things like that. But it's just the lack of a quality goal scorer up front that's been, I think, their biggest issue. And any team that's serious about going on and getting something out of this season would be going and looking for someone in January.
Interesting. Okay. I mean, I think I disagree with you, because they have to shift their focus this season. Right, they're not going to. Obviously, it's the A-League. Everything's tight. Anything could happen, but they shouldn't realistically be aiming for any legitimate success this season. So, if your next point of call for real success, as in an A-League trophy, is 18 months away, then I think you got to focus on the players you have here, or if there's a young kid coming up, right?
Fair,
because you have the time to be able to develop, to be able to train, to be able to change little things you want. So where I'm looking at the likes of Sydney FC, Melbourne Victory, the Wanderers, probably Melbourne City as well, where they're looking to bring in solid names now to add to the quality right now in these next few months to get towards May in the final series. Absolutely. But for Mariners, I think they need to go a little more of the slow game, and we know where they are as a club as well. They're not going to have a lot of money to bring in someone spectacular, nor would the expected value of that deal be as high in this moment.
I kind of agree with that point as well. It's entirely dependent on their perspective and what they want out of the season and where they view themselves, in 18 months. But it feels like with some of these players, like with an Alu Kuol, it feels like you know what you're going to get with him, and you're going to get goals, but you're not going to get them often enough. He's 2 stints with the Mariners now where he's scored a few goals, but just, it's been over quite a few games, big chunks of time spent on the pitch without any real impact. Ryan Edmondson, obviously a season and a half in now and pretty similar. So it does feel like with those two, perhaps you've identified the player that you want in 18 months isn't there. So, why not go looking now? And then you do get that time to be able to bed them in. You get the back end of this season where you can go, right, we're packing it in. We know we're not going to compete. Just go out there and let's get you used to things. Let's get you embedded into the team, start to play the sort of football we want to play with you in the side. And then come next season, we're going to be so good because we've had an extra, 6 months of practice compared to everybody else in the league. So, almost sort of throwing it back at you there. Yeah. It's a case of, well, why not go looking now if that player that's supposed to be here in 18 months isn't here at the moment?
No, both very good arguments. Interesting to see what they do. Mount Smart Stadium is turning into a bit of a fortress for Auckland at the moment. I think they got the one loss there from Western United, if I remember correctly. Yep. But apart from that, they looked very convincing. Melbourne City were the ladder leaders going into the round. They dispatched them completely in the first half, highlighted by a ridiculous goal from Guillermo May. A couple of really nice long-range finishes in this round. I don't know if you were listening. I think it was Rashid Mahazi. They were talking on Suited and Booted the other day about like bicycle kick goals, and his whole thesis was that, bicycle kick goals, most of the time they just kind of miss the pass and they're just throwing themselves at it and they get lucky. But like a really solid strike from 30 or 40 yards is just so much more technique and
you
so
have
much more
to hit it well.
You got to hit it well, and there are a few of those. And Myers in this game was a brilliant example of that.
Such a good hit.
Just Auckland, their ability. I know they're dealing with a few injuries as well, but that home stadium, obviously, that the community around them in Auckland, we know this, has gotten around them massively since they've come into the league. Even before that, arguably, before they even kicked the ball, they had a pretty good following, and they get some pretty good crowds when they play at home. Obviously, the travel factor for the opposition as well. I don't think there is anyone in the league at the moment, even when they're coming in with a really good run of form, goes to Auckland and is the favourites to win a game of football at the moment, which is just such a big advantage for them.
Yeah, well, I think Fortress is spot on because, yes, the isolation, it makes it incredibly difficult for away fans to travel. So you're not going to have a massive turnout.
They got a pretty big moat as well around it.
Yeah. But no, it's like, it would feel like being completely behind enemy lines for an away team to be there. So you can sort of understand why they have been so good at home this season and just shutting teams out. And this is a City team that went top of the table, and everyone's like, are they turning their fortunes around? Come up against Auckland, and Auckland are up for the fight. And yes, okay, a wonder strike for one of the goals, but it's one of 3 that they put past City. Who, yes, okay, we've been talking incessantly about who's going to score their goals. They haven't seemed to worry about that, and they've been scoring goals anyway. Now that's finally come to bite them, and they didn't have anybody, and they couldn't put one back and try and get back into the game. So Auckland it was clearly just a little blip, right? Like, a loss to Perth, that would be demoralizing for anybody.
Yeah.
But it's, it's the way they've been able to sort of fight back from that. And continue to find success is insane. And they've got another big game coming up midweek. We mentioned against Adelaide. It's going to be in Adelaide. It's a bit of travel for them, but it's an Adelaide team that hasn't been fantastic at home. Only won their first home game of the season against the Victory. So it's like, what's the go there? It's going to be a fascinating matchup for sure. 2 teams that on paper look complete opposites to each other as well, right? Adelaide, free-flowing, attacking football, scoring lots of goals. Auckland, resolute defence, don't concede, and then go up the other pitch and try and grab a couple. So, no, everything seems to be going right for Auckland at the moment. And yeah, I mean, going back to that conversation we had right at the start about, connecting with the community, and you sort of touched on it there. That's what Auckland have done. They've got the support. They've gone and grabbed local players who haven't had a chance at this level and said, prove yourself, go out there and show why you should be playing at this level. And they've done that. Like, everything just seems to be going right for them. They've got a great stadium, great support. They're playing great football. It's awesome to see success like that from a brand new team in the league. and sort of shades almost of the Wanderers when they came in and found success almost immediately with the same sort of principle of, connecting with the community, a really good stadium and fan base, local players or names that are associated with that region and the city of Sydney, and they found success. And now Auckland are doing it. So no, it's awesome to see. And that strike, it's going to be on replay for quite a while, I think, because I'm not sure anybody's getting over it anytime soon. Just an incredible hit. And I agree with Mahazi on that it does. The thing with a bicycle kick as well is that oftentimes you see defenders sort of shuffle away from a player that's attempting one.
Yeah, they don't want to get kicked. Yeah,
and they're also like, what are the odds of this even going in anyway? He's just going to shank it wide. Whereas with a proper hit from outside the box, you've got 6 bodies in front of you plus the goalkeeper.
He was getting closed down hard as well.
Yeah, he was getting closed immediately once the ball got to him. So awesome finish. And he's one of those players who I don't think has played as well as he should be doing so far this season. I remember before round 1 kicked off in our fantasy competition, and you sent a trade request to my team, Nicholas Milanovic for Guillermo Mai, and I was like, it's not happening because he's not been fantastic for them. And now
been pretty good.
Now he's been very, very good over the last few weeks. So that's just an added boost for Auckland.
Another game that felt like it was settled by halftime, Western United against Newcastle. So this game is like not 2 halves, but there is 2 distinct stories for this game. One is Western United just being so organised, especially in their press. It was really well thought out and polished and very structured without being rushed. And they just allowed Newcastle to almost just walk into them, and they were able to turn the ball over in dangerous positions in that kind of that kind of gap between the middle and the front third so often. And just a couple of passes later, they were in behind. And so that just solidity of Western and being clinical in front of goal. And then the other side of this game, the other half of my brain, is just picturing Ryan Scott walk the ball out of the box whilst holding it and giving away that free kick. And it's just the comedy and just pure footballing noose of John Aloisi, and it somehow those things combined and a football game was played. Look, I think Western United were completely dominant. As I said, this game felt over by at least the 60th minute, even after Lockie Rose scored that goal. It was a bit of a calamitous defensive effort from Western, right? I never really thought that the Jets were going to have another arm into this match. Yeah. And then just Ryan Scott going walkabout. It's just a complete. That's something you see in like
under 10s football.
Yeah.
Like it's like they're not paying attention to where they are and they just keep walking and their coach is screaming at them, no, stop. And they don't think it's referring to them, so they just keep walking and then they give away that free kick. Yeah. It's what's going on there, mate? Like, I've praised him so much this season as well for being one of the bright spots in the Jets side, and then he goes and does that. Like, come on, mate. But yeah, no, I agree that if regardless of that, Western were just way too good for them, and it felt like they were just almost on cruise control, right? Because everything went to plan. They had this press set up, they knew what they were going to do, and Newcastle just walked right into it without a second thought. And that's, that makes things so easy for a side when you just have to do what you've been instructed, and the other team don't try and, to break that apart in any way. They just do what you want them to do every single time they get the ball. That's huge. And, Western will be really happy with that, because the Jets are a team this season who, they're one of those ones where you kind of want to be taking the points off them, and you don't want to be making it a lot of hard work, because there are other teams where you're going to want to work hard to get those points off, and you're going to have to work hard to get points off of them. The Jets should not be one of those sides. So Western will be happy that they were able to do it relatively easily. And another good performance for them. I mean, they're the form side in the league at the moment, right? They just keep finding results. They keep getting these wins. And they're the only side to go to Auckland away and get a win. Like, they're doing things right so far, and the Jets are, you're right. It's these two completely different storylines of a clinical side and then a circus almost in the Jets. I still feel like the Jets, they are like a step or a half step ahead of Perth and Brisbane.
I agree. Yeah,
but it's like there's still moments where you go, "Oof, that's not very, very good." And this game was one of those.
Yeah, I think look, 6 out of 7 for Western now in terms of their win record. So they've shot up to equal third on points with Melbourne City, who again top last week. So they're right in the mix, and now Western they've looked extremely polished. And when you have, it's interesting. We're talking about a lot of specific players when it comes to Adelaide and Auckland, definitely Sydney, but Western feel like a really well-gelled team at the moment.
Yeah.
So that bodes very
well. They
well
sort of had
them.
that crisis we talked about with Garuccio. Is he Trent Alexander-Arnold sort of thing?
Was that a crisis, or was that
well,
just us
well, that's the
fun?
thing, right? Like when that's your biggest problem with your
true.
squad.
Yeah.
Like, you've got things right.
Yeah, and Angus Thurgate is absolutely ripping it up for them this season
good.
as well. Just being everywhere they need him to be, and just doing the simple things every single time and not making errors. It's really underrated how much of value a solid player like him can bring to a team. He's having an extraordinary year. They are losing one player, Tom Hewitt-Bell, the reserve goalkeeper. Played a little bit at the start of last season. What was impressive to some extent, he is being transferred over to J2, and according to Joey Lynch, is commanding a transfer fee as well. Can't imagine it would be massive. He's not a starting goalkeeper in the A-League, but good for Western to get
any little helps.
A little bit of money. Absolutely. I do want to jump back briefly to something I accidentally skipped over the rundown. I'm really upset because I have a good segue for this as well. We're talking about Hayden Matthews, and then my question was going to be, what do you do when you sell a centre-back? You buy a striker, of course, because Josh Sotirio is back in the A-League. In all fairness, I know there were a lot of jokes like that going around on social media. Very reasonable cover, I think, actually, for Patrick Wood, whose loan move to Perth Glory is confirmed. It's only a 6-month contract for Sotirio, so you're going to loan out a young, valuable striker with lots of room for improvement to a club where he's going to get minutes and bring in some older, just cover.
Depth player,
I think that just makes sense. I know
that's the thing, right? Like, Sydney fans have been very vocal about, but Wood's the better player. Why not just keep him around? And it's like, well, because neither of them, the plan isn't for either of them to have massive.
Exactly. Maybe Sotirio a little bit in the ACL too. He has experience playing in Asia, which Talay mentioned, but apart from that, not much.
Yeah, exactly. So it seems like it's kind of smart, and just another familiar face back in the league. It's going to feel like, a few years ago now again with him back. But no, it's just they've not brought. That's the other thing, right? That City fans are going on about. Oh, but Hayden Matthews is leaving, so why have you brought a striker in? It's like, well, you can need more than one position.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's
just the timing.
Yeah, it's just not great timing. It looks a bit silly, but no, I've got no problems with this move, to be honest. Smart bit of business for Sydney. You watch that come back and bite me now, and he gets injured or something, and then they have to bring somebody else in. But no, just on paper, it looks like a pretty smart move.
Talay said as well in that interview that they're still looking at more people to come in January as well. So don't be surprised if there's more defensive cover. I think that would be clever as well. Perth Glory had the bye this week, but they're still in the news. Abdul Faisal, the 19-year-old who joined from, was it the WA NPL he actually played for last year? I can't remember. But anyway, he joined the club at the start of the season. He is returning back. The reason I was questioning that is because I know he's going back to New South Wales. Yeah. I'm not sure the exact release clause.
No, he was playing NPL New South Wales.
He wasn't. Okay, he was in New South Wales. But he's returned to be closer to his family. Apparently, he's had some difficulty transitioning off the field in Perth. So Ross Beligra was talking about just kind of a duty of care they had to a player's well-being in that scenario. So hopefully he's able to settle and rejoin the ranks of professional football shortly. The game that has just finished, Wellington 2, MacArthur 1.
Huge.
I didn't see the second half of this, but I saw Albie Kelly-Hugh make a bit of a mistake deleting the first goal, but then they gave him 3 votes at the end of the match. So he's obviously had a pretty good rest of the game.
Well, I've just looked at the stats, and MacArthur had 30 shots. So
there you go.
It seems like Wellington were under the pump a lot of that game.
But from where did Wellington control the match with a low percentage shots?
That's right.
I don't know. But there you go. We're obviously not going to talk about that one too much. But the transfer news that we have on Wellington as well is that Mohamed Altay is departing to the Western Sydney Wanderers. Am I having that right?
I don't know. All I saw before we started recording was that he'd left the club. I'm not 100% sure
All
where
right.
he's
Well,
headed.
let's put like a 20% confidence marker on that call. But leaving the club, I swear someone said on commentary. But maybe it's not.
Yeah,
out in
I'm
the
seeing.
public.
Yeah, rumors saying Wanderers.
Wanderers.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, good guess, Lockie. That'll do.
Yeah.
But interesting because that is a player that Chiefy has called on quite regularly off the bench to as that kind of pivot substitution to move around his troops a
Yes.
little bit. So
Yeah.
that's another puzzle piece that he won't have moving forward.
He even started a little bit last season as well
Yeah.
in a double pivot. So, it's not like he's some player who's just, you just go, it's whatever. He's been a very good utility player for Wellington. It's just another one of those ones this season for Wellington, though, that hasn't played particularly fantastically, I think. And, it's like, so I don't think that Wellington fans are feeling too aggrieved by it, because they're like, well, he's not been quite up to standard this season, whereas last year he was really good off the bench, or, when he started, he was able to bring something that, they could change things around in game around, and, he's just not had that this season. So, wherever he goes, he'll end up probably a similar role, being that utility player in the midfield, able to do a lot of different things. But you're right, for Wellington, another piece that they need to look towards replacing. And, I'm going to throw it back to that Mariners conversation that we had now. And, they've got to be realistic about what their expectations are for the rest of the season. And then that's going to dictate how they approach all of these, injuries and losses. And, was it David Ball as well was another one. So it's like,
I guess they're making room, right?
Yeah, well, that's right. Take the positive from it. They're making room in their squad, but they do have to fill it. So yeah, it's difficult for Wellington this season. They're starting to be brought back down to reality, perhaps after a crazy run last season, and then losing players, and it's they got work to do.
Yeah,
sure.
I mean, you're right, but again, I know I'm going to contradict myself slightly here, but we just had that conversation about expectations. Getting back that win moves them to 17 points. Both them and the Mariners, they're 4 points away from MacArthur and 21. It is insanely tight. Like, even
that's the thing. Like, that's why it's going to be difficult for them, because they're going to have to be realistic about it. And if they do try and push on and close that 4-point gap and don't achieve it, then it's, the resources they put into that has fallen apart. But then if similarly,
but they're also just so close where they just could.
Exactly. So it's really, really difficult.
Yeah, tricky. Interesting. It's going to be a spectacular finish to the year. We're now officially halfway through for everyone except Adelaide, Auckland, and Newcastle, who are still on 12 games played. A number of on 13 and a few on 14 as well. So there's lots of ifs, buts, and maybes floating around in terms of phantom 3 points here and there as well. But it's going to be fun to watch the table tick up and down as we head towards the final series in May. But that will do for this episode of the Round Ball Australia podcast, Jacob. I appreciate you coming on, as always. It is always nice just once in a while to chat one-on-one and these things.
Yeah.
A bit more of an intimate conversation.
For a break. Yeah, that's right.
And
don't have to worry about Christian with some crazy take or something.
Yes, no, exactly. You're right, actually. He's busy with the tennis. He can have his crazy opinions over there. We do miss him, though. We're looking forward to having him back. But we thank you for your company, as always. A bit of a longer one today. Plenty to talk about the A-League, as ever. What an entertaining league we have. We will see you on Friday. There's some more midweek football to consider as we get stuck into the nitty-gritty of 2025 in the A-League. But thank you again for listening. We'll see you then. Goodbye.